Hey, welcome everyone, and we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock on the dot. I hope that was loud enough. I've been instructed to whack it harder. Good, I'm learning. Okay, so first order of business is roll call, and it looks like we're just missing Mike and Paula.
Paul, I believe, is going to call in to my cell phone.
Oh,
I'm
is
waiting
she?
for her to call in. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Go ahead, and when
Okay.
she calls in, we'll just put her on.
Carry on.
speaker.
Okay, well, as of right now, we're just missing Mike and Paula. Adoption of the agenda. Do you have a motion to adopt the agenda? No changes by acclamation?
Maybe.
Go ahead.
So Jamie wrote us about seconding the committee members, and that wasn't done at the last meeting. So is that something that we need to take care of now so that those committees don't have any issues moving forward?
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard whether or not that was resolved. Yeah, Jamie had emailed,
Yeah.
just to reiterate, Jamie had emailed asking who seconded when we approved the committees.
I don't think anybody did second that, so you guys will have to second that and go from there.
How do you want to do that, Josh? Do you want to just by acclamation?
Yes.
Is that good with everyone? By acclamation to approve the committee members that we attempted to vote it on at the last meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, by acclamation.
Well, then is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that good?
You're the dude.
And so we also need someone, since Paul is absent, do we have someone to notate for us? Okay. Whitney? Okay, thank you. Okay, new business and voting is necessary. And any concerns regarding the treasurer position in the event of a recall?
Okay.
Go ahead, Linda.
Alrighty. If the SGM results in all named directors being removed, there will remain only one executive director to sign checks, Vice President Bowens. Should less than 5 be removed, there is still a chance that the Vice President could remain the only signer. Neither Director D'Angelo nor Director Pierce are executives. Therefore, the board should act by resolution to designate an interim signer if and until such time the executive committee is confirmed after the resulting vote of the SGM. The bylaws, Article 4, Section 11, states all agreements, contracts, deeds, and other instruments of the association shall be executed by 2 officers or by such other persons, including managing agents, as they may be designated by resolution of the board. The attorney, I read an opinion, and I've been looking at my email all day long, but didn't see it till I left the house this evening, has said another option is to also put in an interim treasurer from the directors on the board. I thought initially the concern was that capital checks could not be executed if there weren't 2 signers. And so I think there's a decision you make. One of the options I had looked at is I know that the general manager currently signs operational checks and has that authority. I don't know if he has additional authority to sign capital checks. He's signaling no to me. So therefore, you have an option. You can look at a treasurer, and that's what the attorney sent me an opinion on that I just received today. Or you can look at possibly giving Joe the authority temporarily to be a second signer on capital checks. There's kind of going to be a way to go here until you get another real treasurer, possibly.
Hello?
So I'm not certain where we go from there. You know, I wish I had a crystal ball that I could tell y'all this is exactly what you do. But I definitely think you need to act this evening, either to put a director in the interim treasurer's position, or possibly do a resolution to have Joe be the signer on the check until a treasurer can be elected, appointed, actually appointed and then elected. Because you'll appoint whatever happens at the SGM, whether it's 5, 2, 3, whatever, you're probably going to wait to have an organizational meeting to fill those positions, if any, of executives and officers that are needed. But you're going to want to be a full board first, I would assume, but that's, again, a discussion for you to have.
Other thoughts?
I guess I would make a motion that we give Joe the authority to sign capital checks in the event that there is not 2 officers remaining after the recall vote until the date of March 31st.
I second that. Oh, wait, sorry.
Discussion.
Linda, didn't you say it would be, Joe would be a second signer on the capital checks, correct?
That's correct, because Joshua's the only, if all 5 are, even if a considerable number of the current named people on the petitions are removed, we will lose our executive, our officers of the corporation.
I find 2 problems with the motion. First is you have given a date certain of March 31st, and I think that it ought to say until new officers have been selected. And the second thing is I would like for it to say interim and not just give him authority. So, and for those reasons, I would be voting against that motion.
Would you like to make an amendment to the motion then?
We have to vote on this motion before we make another one.
You can amend the motion. You can amend the motion.
Yeah.
I would be gutting it, and I would prefer to make another motion completely.
Go ahead, Linda.
Moving forward, then, I would say in the form, because we're supposed to do it as a resolution, whereas the scheduled association special general meeting of February 8th, 2020, dealing with the recall of 5 directors of the board of directors, could leave the board without a quorum of directors and remove many of the officers who have authority to sign capital checks, and whereas the board of directors desires to ensure that should the majority of the officers of the board be removed, capital checks can be signed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the general manager, Joe Akla, be designated as an interim signer on capital checks should it become necessary by the removal of the majority of the officers of the association until such time as enough directors are appointed and officers elected to be signers.
Second.
Amen. No.
Second that.
Are we submitting another motion now? Yes. We haven't disposed of the first motion.
No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I'm sorry, what am I
It's on
voting for?
AJ's, right?
AJ's?
The original.
Is that what I'm voting on? Okay.
Okay. No one signified.
We get a
So can we just say it died and go to the next thing? Okay. All right. Next one is as stated or by Linda.
Second.
And there's a second. For any discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, as far as that goes, if we put Joe in as the second signer and all 5 board members are recalled, then Joshua will be on the hook permanently as the only board member, and he will have to be available for signing checks all the time, along with Joe. If it's a little tight, but if that's...
Any further discussion?
Steffi.
Is that That would be for 30 to 60 days until we got it, correct?
It's left open until you can reestablish the officers of the corporation that have the ability to do that. Will it be more than 30 days? Like I say, I wish I had a crystal ball.
Right, we're making I'm having a hard time because we're making an if-then, a hypothetical statement. And it's also hard to, I mean, it seems like it's a good idea to give it to Joe just because then, I'm choosing my words very carefully. Nobody on the board right now looks like they're impartial. You know, I think it would be good. He's already signing operational checks. And this is an if-then, all 5 being recalled. I mean, it's also hard because I don't know why the attorney didn't address that. Not that I want the responsibility, but he's asking people who are up to question to make a decision. Like, why didn't he cover that? I mean, I feel like that kind of hangs people out to dry too.
In his response, he spoke of finding a treasurer from within the board. And that treasurer, which again, it isn't time, it's until of the treasurer, or the officer of the treasurer can once again be elected by the board. He doesn't put a time on it. I can't either. Hopefully, we're going to have lots of people apply and there won't be an issue.
Right.
You know, the one thing that he did point out to us very specifically is that should all 5 be recalled, it's going to be pertinent to as soon as possible. Once again, you have it open for 30 days. If you get enough people, in theory, on the 32nd day, you could say, or if you have more than enough applicants that you know you're going to be able to, you can quietly email the board and say, I currently have 9 applicants for these positions, and at which time you're going to be able to say, okay, I can call a meeting on this day and you fill it as soon as possible. You know, more than anyone, I want to see it done.
I know. Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Sorry,
I just,
I think since staff, AKA Mr. Joe Akla, is already available and is probably pretty capable of signing a check, I think that would be, I think it would be perfect.
Go ahead.
Joe, how many capital checks would you envision needing to be signed here in the next 30 to 45 days?
Under 10?
I guess based on that, I feel like, you know, I don't think it's going to be some major to do, and that I agree with what Josh said. Having Joe have that authority seems like a reasonable thing to do at this time.
Go ahead, Karen.
I'm virtually raising my hand.
Let's let Paula go first.
Oh, good.
I think that only having one other person to sign so the motion on the table right now is whether or not to allow Joe to be the second signer, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just trying to, that's the only motion on the table right now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So my concern is that we did have the attorney weigh in on the idea of an interim treasurer, and we haven't had him weigh in on this idea about Joe being the second signer. And not that I know that there would be any problems, but since we do have an attorney opinion on the one, and we're kind of in uncharted territory here, we have kind of a one shot to do this and make sure we have it covered. And so it makes me just a little bit concerned that we haven't definitely checked that avenue with him to make sure it's fine.
I guess the bylaws are pretty clear on that we're allowed to do that. Article 4 of officers, Section 11, agreements, contracts, deeds, license, checks, etc. All agreements, contracts, deeds, leases, and other instruments of the association shall be executed by at least 2 officers or by such other persons, including managing agents, i.e. Joe, as may be designated by resolution of the board, provided resolution from Linda.
It does also say under the, I gotta pull it up, under the treasurer, that checks are to be by two executives. So I have seen both parts of it, but to me, the checks are specifically called out as 2 executives.
Raising my hand again.
Can you, do you have that section?
Yeah, it's, getting familiar with my binder.
The authority for the general manager to sign operations checks comes from a board policy, and it's not in the bylaws themselves.
That's where he's talking about the one section that says that the board can give that authority to a managing agent.
Yes, that's correct, and that's the reason that the board set up a policy allowing the general manager to do that, because the authority to do so is given in the bylaws.
You know, I guess my concern is if we're going to go back to the attorney's opinion and having an interim treasurer from within the board, he actually mentions, but because the office of interim treasurer is not set forth in the bylaws, we recommend that this action be accomplished by adopting a resolution. The resolution would accomplish the following: appoint one of the current directors who is not subject to recall to the interim office of interim treasurer, define the duties of the interim treasurer, and it says presumably the interim treasurer would have the same duties and obligations as the treasurer, but only during an interim period, which commences when and if the association announces that the treasurer has been recalled, and ending on the date that the board elects a new treasurer. And it says the office of interim treasurer automatically dissolves if the current treasurer is not recalled at the February 8th SGM.
And the
But once again, he's saying that then the duties of this person would have to be done in a resolution, and you're going to have to do a lot more in the resolution than just ask Joe to sign checks. That's, you know, I don't know what business, if indeed several of the officers, and we're down to nothing, the treasurer would do on their own, other than sign a check. Because you can't act on your own. You yourself know that. You're allowed to bring things forward to the board, but the board votes on your actions.
You're absolutely right. And I don't take actions on my own. We have meetings of the Finance Committee at which the financial transactions are presented, and then after the analysis by the people on the Finance Committee, those are the things that are brought forward to the board. The treasurer does not act on her own. And that section that you just read from the attorney's letter, it goes on, the next sentence says, "We recommend this approach to deal with the potential recall of the current director."
Does Paula have her hand virtually raised?
I think she
Paula?
said she did.
On the phone, Paula, does she have her hand?
She said she did.
Does Paula want to talk?
Is she on the phone?
Paula, thank you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I had earlier, but I think you just covered it. I think since the issue of an interim, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm getting feedback. Since the idea of an interim director was brought up, I think, given the attorney's letter and the fact that we have 4 board members, only one that is currently going to be able to sign checks, that even if we do allow the general manager to sign checks, it would be irresponsible of us to not appoint somebody else to be able to do that in the interim until they can appoint somebody. Given both our attorney has told us that, and only having one other person other than the general manager to do it just seems extremely irresponsible. And although this wasn't bothered to be thought out of before, I think that we have a responsibility to do it at this point.
Go ahead,
I
EJ.
think Karen was.
Just a point of information, Steph, you asked me before, so under section 7, treasurer, item B, all checks shall require 2 officers' signatures. And then later on, in section 11, it talks about appointing a managing agent.
Sorry.
So you're talking about that the attorney is recommending this approach. However, the only thing you asked the attorney was, may the board appoint a current member to the position of interim treasurer to fill the role of treasurer in the event the recall vote is successful. Therefore, you never even asked the attorney for an opinion on appointing Joe this authority. So of course, he's only responding to exactly what you ask him. So, you know, there's to say that the attorney's only recommending this approach, it was the only approach we asked him to recommend. So it's a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion, to say that that's what he's recommending when it's the only thing you actually asked.
Disingenuous? Okay.
Also, yeah, I agree with what AJ said, but I don't think it said it was irresponsible anywhere. And, you know, we talked about Joe would just be signing 10 to 11 checks. And, I mean, have we asked anyone if they're willing to be here and cover it? Joe, are you willing to do that?
It was part of my normal scope of work in my other jobs.
Oh, thank you. Okay, are you willing to do that too? Josh?
I have been doing it, and yes.
Okay, awesome. There's another point. Done.
Leslie. Go ahead.
Without a treasurer, we would be taking no new financial decisions for the next 30, 45 days, whatever it takes to create a new board. That whatever we have for now, and that if there were some other financial problems that came up, we wouldn't be able to deal with them until we do have a new treasurer.
I guess if the association and staff can't run the association for 30 to 45 days, it seems like we have bigger issues here than what you're talking about. You know, at the end of the day, like, Joe's responsible. No, I mean, the lawyer told us in our orientation that governing is a slow process, and that, you know, we don't have to make any decision at any specific board meeting, and it can pretty much any vote can always be pushed off to a future board meeting. And, you know, barring some natural disaster that happens, like, I think staff could go 30 to 45 days without a capital request for something.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about that natural disaster with the wind coming in and blowing the roof off of a building. And we do need to find somebody to do the repairs. I think that there are situations where, yes, you will need to make financial decisions in a timely manner, which would not happen if you didn't have a treasurer in place.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that's my concern too, is that, you know, if you just think, oh yeah, we're just running its business as usual, probably there isn't a problem. The issue is when, if something unexpected comes along, if Joshua's the only one that can sign checks, and he is called out of town for some time, and something, you know, I realize this is kind of worst-case scenario, but I do think as a board, it is important for us to be able to show the membership that we have all bases covered under any circumstance.
I think that that's what Joe does. Staff is supposed to handle that. Just like the snow, things like that. That was great, thank you. So I think that that's what they do. And you would have he and another signer, and wouldn't you get the information together, bids about the roofs and things? Who does that?
Well, if we had an emergency situation, let's say this roof fell off, oh yeah, there would be an emergency I'd have crews in here, we'd have to have something to seal up the building right away, and then we'd go
Right.
out to bid, and then we would go through that process. And we would,
Absolutely.
we'd try to expedite as quickly as we can to get it
Mm-hmm.
done. I mean, we don't want to leave the building open.
Right, all bets are
Yeah,
off.
but at that point, at that point, if there was a natural disaster like that, the board, we would convene, and we would go, and we got to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what would happen.
Okay,
AJ?
So as I understand, if all 5 are recalled, whether we have a treasurer or not, there's no voting on the capital request regardless. We can't do business other than filling the board director to a quorum regardless. So if there's not a treasurer, we can't vote on it anyways, even if there was a treasurer, still to bring it forward if we're underneath the quorum. Now, if we're not underneath the quorum, then that's a different thing. But this is, I mean, we're just going down this road of like this or that, or what, we're making motions on things that we don't even know are gonna happen or not, and, it's.
Paula?
Paula?
I just want to reiterate again that whether or not any other questions were asked of the attorney, this specific question was asked of the attorney, and we've been given legal advice that we should do this. And handicapping the board by not looking forward far enough to appoint one of the executive committee positions, a vital position to the board, in the event that we are recalled, proactively taking care of that, I will use the word again, seems irresponsible when we have the ability. We have 4 people sitting here that will, regardless of what happens in this recall, be sitting on the board, and only one guaranteed director. To not place a second director in the position of treasurer, like I said, I would put that down as irresponsible in light of the attorney's advice that we go forward with that.
oh, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I want to, tag onto what Paula said, is that I think that our responsibility is to mitigate risk. And so there is a risk period where we may not have a quorum. We have been given some advice on how to handle that, to make that as short as possible. And then we have this longer time frame where we could still potentially do necessary business, but we couldn't do something outside of that. And what is being suggested by the attorney and with the interim treasurer idea is that we would shorten that risk period where the board may not be able to act, and the things that they may not be able to act on.
Also, if you look in the bylaws, the description of the executive committee is that in the absence of the board, the inability of the board to act, the executive committee can deal in emergency situations. Without another executive, Josh will be making all of those decisions himself.
So I didn't get this email until I was driving here, and I think there's one other one that I haven't even had a chance to read. So you got this on January 30th, which was Thursday, and we could have, we could have asked more than one option, and we also could, we could postpone and ask about Linda's option and reconvene in 48 hours, correct? What? We have a meeting on Thursday, so we could add it to the. Okay. So we could potentially find out about Linda's motion as stated, correct? By Thursday?
AJ?
So regardless of if we have a treasurer or not, the executive committee is composed of not less than 3 officers, so we wouldn't have an executive committee regardless, even if we have an interim treasurer and Josh.
Karen?
If we had an interim treasurer named, we would have a better likelihood of having an executive committee intact, because we would have 2 executives that would stay beyond the recall. Without the interim treasurer, we are at risk of losing 3 of the executive committee. So it, again, it minimizes the risk. Also, I want to say, we had a discussion before about the availability when scheduling this meeting. Before we decide to push it off, if we're gonna go that route, I think we need to make sure that we would have a quorum at a later meeting.
I guess mitigating risk or not, you still need 3 officers, so 2 does not equal 3.
So,
Didn't really give the board any time to, with the email being late, you know, so I really would think it would be good to postpone. I think we all have a lot of good points put in.
Yeah, it's scary, because I've been kind of monitoring my email all afternoon, and I didn't see this until I got home, and yet it's dated January 30th.
Email came at 6:25 today.
you're right, it did. Yeah, I shot it off as soon as I saw it, got it to the team. We're here tonight, so that's where we are.
You know, no matter what we do, even if we have an interim treasurer, and I'm not saying that's up to you guys, whatever you do, but you're going, you know, he goes, you're going to have to decide what duties does that person do and what don't they do during that interim period of time. You know, are we going to have finance committee meetings? Are we going to do all this during that period of time? Because he said that by resolution, you're going to have to give that person, take a look at what the responsibilities of the treasurer are and look which of them are going to be relevant. You know, he said there's all the duties, but then he also writes, you need to define the duties of the interim treasurer. And it says, presumably, the interim treasurer would have the same duties and obligations as the treasurer, but only during an interim period. And it's like, is that true? Because, you know, there's the finance committee and all of their responsibilities, and then the treasurers. And I don't know if giving that all away during an interim period of time is really the wisest thing either. But that's up to you guys. I just, you know, for me it was, you know, we thought the treasurer simply because you would be, whoever that person was would be signing checks. You know, and I don't know how much business, you know, like I say, we all wish we knew. We're at that point, you know, but you would have to look and you're going to have to develop a resolution that says what the, if it's a director, what the duties are and what they aren't. You know, are there any constraints on any of this? But that's up to you guys.
So assuming there's no constraints, there's 2 options on the table. One is we move forward with the resolution as stated earlier by Linda, which is actually what's on the table right now. That's what we're discussing. The second option would be to appoint an interim treasurer to fulfill that role until it's fulfilled at a later time, not the interim position. So those are the 2, that's really what it comes down to, that we're kind of going back and forth, right? Or we can wait and make a decision at Thursday's meeting, what we want to do. So I guess there's really 3 options on the table.
We have a motion on the table.
There's a motion on the table, but we're talking about really 3 options, is what I'm hearing, right? Okay, so if there's any further discussion on the resolution, and we learn to restate the motion, which after so many whereases, Linda, Joe to be an interim second signer on capital checks until new officers have been elected. Was that the?
That's the gist of it.
Perfect.
They have to go do that.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 2, 3, 4 in favor. Those opposed signify by saying no.
All opposed? Paula, are you voting?
I was for.
Here's in favor.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So the motion carries.
Okay.
Okay, that takes care of that. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next item of business is the vote to release attorney's opinion, process to fill board vacancies in event of recall. Can that be by acclamation that we approve to do that?
Can you explain what that means to release? that? Like, does it have to come from you, or does that mean?
No,
us,
just,
or
yeah, anyone,
Does it just go up on the website? Do we ask them to put it on the website, or?
we can do that too. I
How
meant
do
it,
we do that?
I meant it open-ended, yeah, good
Okay.
question. You know, we can post it on the website if we need to. If someone asks for it from you, it's full disclosure, we want to get the word out.
It's easier to just put it on the website and tell people if they want to have the attorney's opinion, it's on the website.
Yep.
Okay,
Lisa, can you do that?
is that by acclamation? We all good there? Just need some nods.
Yes.
I know, anyone?
Okay,
Are we,
Silent no.
are we voting to release the attorney's opinion dated December 23rd?
Clarify that, yep.
yes,
We know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
December 23rd.
We're trying to approve by acclamation, but if it's
So
not,
we're voting to, or approving by acclamation, the attorney's memorandum to the Sun Valley Board of Directors dated December 23rd, 2019, regarding the applicable process for filling vacancies on the board.
You can have that to read it if you want. Do you have it? That is the one that you sent to all of us. This one.
yes, we verified the 23rd, yes.
Do you want to see it? Okay.
Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you, everyone. We'll get that on the website as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay, next is item C, filling vacancies discussion.
Can I open this baby up?
Thank you.
Okay, I think our main concern is that should all 5 be recalled, entity is prepared upon request of the remaining board to, first, open the application process to solicit candidates, followed by voting of the board to appoint a director to obtain a quorum of the board as soon as possible, which is what the attorney has indicated we really, really need to do. This may well require a special board meeting, so the board may again conduct business. Second, fill any other vacancies until the board has 9 voting members, and we're hoping to do this in a manner that will provide candidates from the membership willing to serve until the November AGM. I think if we modify our process, which there's no rule to, that we could, depending upon if we have enough people apply in the 30 days. I'm talking to a wonderfully large audience out there, that if you're interested in applying for the board, should it be necessary, we're looking for applicants, but that we do this, that we possibly could do that all in one meeting. We, in the past, have always segregated candidates separately. And I spoke with Ann McCartney on Thursday, and she said, Linda, they don't do that other places. They have the applicants come and they sit in the audience and they're allowed to do that. Somebody said that you might suggest to have a set number of questions that the board might want to ask these people, and then they would know ahead of time, here are the questions you might be asked. The board may not ask everybody that, but that way you could get a quorum of the board. Once you have a quorum, then that person would assist in voting the rest of the members on. You're still going to have to appoint them one by one. But you, in theory, could have at that meeting a full board. You could then option to also organize and reset any necessary officers that you need to do, and just do it and get it over with. Because I think the longer you wait to open a separate 30 days for the other possible remaining board members past a quorum is just, I don't know, it's dancing through the graveyard here. It's just, I really think I'd like to just do it and do it all at once. I would still need to talk with the committee, but I think it's a possible way to do that whereby you could take an action and have a board again as soon as possible.
Leslie?
This doesn't agree, from what I read the attorney's email, and it is, basically, he's describing a process whereby you advertise and you bring on one more person in order that you shall have a quorum, and then you go out and you ask for applications for the remaining 4 members, and in a second meeting, then you will interview them and bring them aboard. Did I misunderstand?
I guess I feel like the attorney didn't specifically say you need to advertise for another 30 days after you fill the quorum. It seems like you could bring on your 5th board member to have a quorum, and then they would be the one that would be appointed, and then they would be then helping appoint the remaining 4 directors at that same meeting.
I guess you could, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess you could close the meeting and reopen with the 5th. I mean, if you felt like it was, not think of it, it had to be a totally separate meeting, but I don't feel like it specifies.
That's an interesting option, that if we would have a large pool of applicants to have a meeting, find the quorum, and then call the meeting, but then open another meeting for the rest of the board, rather than waiting, especially if you get, let's say we get 8 people or 9 people or 10 people. You know, you're going to make them wait another 30 days? I don't know. That's a good, you could ask him that question. I think, he's more concerned about the quorum and conducting business. That most definitely is his focus.
Go ahead.
So, I think I'm following this, but where he's saying that there are 2 separate actions. One is to, instruct NNE to solicit candidates for the following: 1 interim director to be appointed for the abbreviated period, and then 5 directors, and he specifically says using the full 30-day solicitation period. I thought what I was hearing us talk about here was not using the full 30 days.
No, use the full 30
So
days.
only for that interim, we're not using, okay, thank you.
It's just so that if you do get a large pool, like we did this last time, you can fill one position, then make everybody else go away for another 30 days? Or are you better off just saying, okay, I now have the interim? Because then as each person is appointed onto the board, they're allowed to vote on that next person until you reach 9. And you know how much fun the board, the meeting was to get you put on the board. I'm going to bring reams of paper. But it's just, that's why I'm saying, with something like this being so time-sensitive, and maybe we're looking at the worst-case scenario, but NNE's been looking at that as the worst-case scenario first and foremost, and how to make sure that we do diligence to the association.
Yeah, I'm looking at the final paragraph from the December 23rd memo from the attorney. He says, if the vote on the recall results in fewer than 5 board members, the remaining board members should elect only the minimum number required to achieve a quorum. For example, if 5 board members are recalled such that there are 4 remaining members, the 4 members should fill only 1 vacancy. At that point, there are enough board members to satisfy a quorum, so all 5 should act to fill the remaining vacancies.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. You'd bring 1 person on board to reach a quorum, and then those 5 people would then fill the remaining 4 vacancies.
Hand raised.
Yes?
I also want to, he also said that even though the recall has not yet occurred, it is within the board's authority to be proactive and to direct NNE to initiate the solicitation process now in order to minimize the time period that the association would be without a quorum. So, I mean, to me, and this is, the board would establish an abbreviated period to solicit the interim director position. So we could ask for that to be posted immediately, given that it's, the 8th is the recall, and we could have somebody into that position fairly quickly, given that paragraph by the attorney.
Where did he write that? Help me?
That's in the new attorney memo.
Oh,
So I guess you know, one thing that I take from this new attorney memo that we just got, and I certainly haven't had enough time to kind of read through and digest all of it at this point, but he says, I fully recognize that an interim board position, which I'm suggesting is not authorized by the bylaws. And so it seems to me that it may be the best way to deal with the association's immediate needs, but that it could result in a legal challenge. Seems to me like potentially we could, at this meeting, request NNE solicit for 30 days, and when that 30 days is up, we could have a meeting to, if all 5 are recalled, appoint that 5th person to get a quorum, and then at that same meeting, appoint the remaining 4 directors, as well as schedule an organizational meeting for afterwards to fill our officer roles.
Yeah, Paula brought up the attorney memo dated January 30th. Is that what we're discussing right now? Well, then I think that now legally we have to release that as well. We cannot discuss one and then the other in an open forum.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, I'm
I'm okay with
just
that. Just as everyone,
throwing that out there.
I think they
And
all
then-
should be.
Right, well, also for transparency, it's nice, but I do believe legally we cannot discuss it in an open forum and then claim attorney-client privilege, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so. Anyway, it's better for transparency anyway, because we are discussing one memo and then we brought another one in, so everyone should be able to follow and look at them. So you'll put that too?
Yeah, and
Thank
there's
you.
also one more recent that we just got, that we
Okay.
haven't talked about, kind of, I don't know, a little bit. We've kind of talked about it, so either we just say, these are all open, or we go into closed session, and that
Right,
was odd. So
right,
let's-
right.
Can we just all agree that these
open.
are all open?
Good.
Is that good?
Okay, so
Is
there's a
everyone
date
okay
for
with that?
January 30th, and then, there's a third one,
February
And
1st.
that was a February 1.
February 1st. I can't get internet in here very well, so.
Yep.
You- okay.
Or if you're already
Anyone,
got it up.
yeah, if anyone can get service, we will get those to you.
So can I clarify, AJ, what,
No, go ahead, do that. This has to do with vacancies. Go ahead.
so AJ, what you're proposing is opening now for a full 30 days and then appointing all necessary in one meeting? So we skip the interim process?
Leslie said open now. The bylaws say I cannot open the 30 days until I have a vacancy.
Yeah.
Right now, no vacancy exists.
Can we approve now for you to open it when a vacancy occurs? Is that okay? Like, we know it could happen on the 8th, and we go ahead and give you approval so that you can go on the 8th?
I think so. Usually it's the vacancy occurs and, like I say, but that's possible that,
I'm just
if
trying,
it's, Monday morning, it can go up. I need to talk to Brent about that too, because I'm sure the views will be out by then, and that was kind of what I was wondering about a little bit, because that's one of the main avenues, plus the website and stuff that we have for announcing, the results of the SGM, how that affects the association, whatever. But I'm saying, in theory, according to the bylaws, I can't do that. Could you give me permission now? Probably, because the vacancy hasn't occurred, but it's either going to have to happen now at this meeting or at the conclusion of the SGM, the remaining board is going to have to direct the NNE.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I would just be cautious about probablys and stuff like that. I would like to know for sure if we can do that legally.
again,
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
I'm trying to find it now, but I thought I read in here something that basically authorized the current board to act in anticipation of this kind of unprecedented event. If I can find the wording, I will, but that's why I suggested it, because if there's anything that this current board can do, again, to minimize that risk, that exposure that we might have to not be able to operate fully and functionally, I think that this current board should act in the best interest of the association.
Yes, and so what we could do is we could direct NNE tonight to open the process to fulfill one interim director position for 30 days, which would expire at the end of those 30 days. So that's one option that would also be on the table.
It says, even though a recall vote has not yet occurred, it is within the board's authority to be proactive and to direct NNE to initiate the solicitation process now in order to minimize the time period the association would be without a quorum.
So we could have NNE say, it's opened now, and you could do a simple version, like you could say it's open for a week to solicit candidates to fulfill an interim board director to fulfill that 30-day period, which,
I need to read his opinion, and I don't have it.
okay.
Which, oh, yeah,
Seems like we could also just do a 30-day from now and go that route. And then we would be able to, after those 30 days, to appoint the board per the process from the first attorney's email. The whole interim board director process seems a bit convoluted to me, and he also states that it's not in the authorized in the bylaws. And so he's saying that you could maybe do this and that a court would probably side with the board because it seems like a prudent thing to do, but at the end of the day, it isn't authorized in the bylaws, and so going that route, you know, could result in a challenge. So it seems like we could just forego that process. He does state that we have the authority to ask NNE to open it now. So we could heed his advice on that, and then,
But, so, yeah, so Linda's saying she can't.
I just haven't seen this opinion.
It doesn't cover what you're saying that I noticed, so, but we could open it now, or we could approve now for you to open it when the vacancies occur, so on February 8th, for 30 days from then. And then the possibility is that we could have no quorum at all for 30 days. So no association business could be done at all. We have that, that's the potential risk.
other than getting back to a quorum by appointing a director. That's the only business we can do.
You still need candidates.
And we can make that motion now tonight, but we can also make that motion at the SGM, and it doesn't really change anything.
The SGM is a special meeting with a fixed agenda, and you can't change it. Linda knows that.
Okay.
But, wait, wouldn't you just do the same thing you did for the AGM and make a motion to have a meeting immediately following the SGM?
I think that was on the agenda, or I think that was on the AGM agenda for the board to do their organizational meeting.
But we voted to do that. We made a motion and in the board meeting.
Did the new board vote for that?
No.
The old board voted to?
Yeah, I sat in the audience.
No, I'm waking.
I was like one of 7 people.
One of the problems with the organizational meeting, according to our bylaws, is, or the organizational meeting after the AGM, is the only business that you can do is the election of officers. And therefore, we scheduled 2 meetings back-to-back. The first one to elect officers, and the second one to do all of the rest of the business that was necessary in order to go forward for the. This is not an AGM, and so what's in the bylaws does not apply.
So basically what we're saying here is that after the SGM, instead of if if the recall was everyone, that it just skips the process of appointing N&E to solicit for applications, and it's automatically there with N&E if that happens.
Well, if we're not gonna do an interim option, then I mean, it just seems like we should at least move forward with soliciting candidates now, so that we limit the number of days after the SGM that we are not operating under.
Well, it's still got to be open 30 days. That,
Right,
you
but if
know,
we
and
wait
even
until the
he's saying you can't
SGM to
make
say
that go
N&E
away. Yeah.
go solicit, then that's prolonging another 5 days from today.
That's a good question. I don't know if you can,
So you can get it started
I don't,
now.
because the bylaws doesn't say that you can go out and solicit early.
Well, I thought you just said you can't without vacancies, but we could approve.
Well, that's
now
what
if
I'm
you-
saying, and everybody else, other people are saying, no, that doesn't apply. And I understand that this being without a quorum is just a critical thing. I get that.
Seems like 6 1/2 dozen of the other, for 4 days or 5 days, whatever. It's Monday, right? So, I mean, either or. I'm not sure if there's gonna be much of a difference.
So I would say what it sounds like is most in line with the bylaws is if we approved now for them to open the vacancies as soon as they occur. So we're not going outside of that process. The only thing we're doing is approving now, and she follows the bylaws and waits for the vacancies, and then it's 30 days from there. And that, to me, seems the closest to follow the bylaws that we have.
I guess I still don't see why we can't just at the SGM, if this all results, ask N&E to do that. It was not an agenda item, and there was no motion needed for when Leslie requested this same thing when Eric resigned.
But we had a quorum then. If it results in,
But it's not a vote. It's just a request to the N&E committee. There was no motion made to request that the N&E advertise for 30 days. It was just, Leslie said, N&E shall solicit for 30 days this.
That's just,
So it's not business.
it's if a director ceases to be a member of the board for any reason excluding suspension as set forth, the board shall immediately request the Nominations and Election Committee to submit not less than one nominee more than the number of vacancies to be filled. So it's not like you need to even make a motion. It is a request of N&E that then, once you have your candidates and stuff, you act upon that. But it's not, Leslie did exactly what we've always done when someone is
I thought that
missing.
it was the president who did that. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I was the one who requested it.
You were.
Okay.
Well, Eric resigned. How could he request it?
Well, after Andrew was selected as president.
No, you did that.
Okay, all right. Everybody agreed?
I just remember it was you that did it. That's all. To make sure it was on the up and up, and I'm doing, the N&E's doing everything they need to do correctly.
so can I ask, so then all it requires to solicit candidates is someone on the board to request it?
Once there's a vacancy, yeah.
Per the bylaw. Can you do that, Josh?
But, I mean, we have no idea what's gonna happen, so this is a lot of
Yeah.
Get out the crystal ball.
speculation.
I agree, but I apologize. I thought that it required a board
Vote,
action.
no.
So if it doesn't, and we can do so, move forward with that without a quorum, then
It also follows along with state law, where it says that if a board comes to such a position that there is no quorum, that they may act to fill the vacancy to get the quorum. So this kind of follows state law that is quoted in the 2403 that he uses. So it's just in finding with it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It would just be the business needed to reach a quorum. That's part of the way our bylaws state we have to do it.
So on that discussion point, it sounds like there's no action item. Okay.
Question.
Go ahead.
Are we going to move as, I think one of the things that we were told that we could do would be to, ask for NNE to solicit candidates on an abbreviated, schedule for the interim director position. And it could be 1 week or less. Do we want to consider, putting that forward, even if it's just for this week, so that that interim position is already open and able to be appointed as soon as possible?
I guess my thoughts are that does go further to state that none of those actions are actually authorized by the bylaws and, you know, I mean, with everything that's happened here, you know, and why we're here right now, the bylaws are, you know, a major part of that. And so I feel like maybe just sticking to what they say is probably the best course of action at this point.
I agree with that, thank you. Yeah, I think we should just go right by the book.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry?
Any further discussion?
Not on this.
Are we okay? We're feeling okay?
I would like to be able to answer something that happened at the last board meeting, if I may.
Okay.
Okay. I was quoted as having said at a coffee and cookies meeting, that the quote exactly was, "You still need to vet this person to ensure they are a member in good standing, even if you do an immediate appointment. The problem with that is they can't do business because there's no quorum." And I now have the ability to speak to the attorney's opinion, and the attorney's opinion in page 2, paragraph 2 states, "thereby providing no opportunity to vet nominees." And so what I said was, you still need to vet the person, and the attorney says, there's no opportunity to vet nominees, and therefore, I believe that my statement was truthful. The second part of that quote was, "The problem with that is they can't do business because there is no quorum." And if you look at page 2, paragraph 5, it says, "For the board of directors to conduct normal business, there must be a quorum present." And therefore, I believe that the second part of my statement, which I made, was quoted almost, again, directly from the attorney's opinion. Therefore, it was truthful. Thank you.
Then you went on to say their business is selecting new board members, insinuating that not having a quorum would result in the inability to select new board
I
members.
believe that if you will read further, and it's the whole discussion we've been having tonight, that the remaining 4 not only are able to, but must select more board members.
I agree with that, but that's not what you said
Therefore,
at that meeting.
The statement that said,
Can I chime in here? Can,
you
Leslie?
can't do business because there's no quorum, that is also a
Leslie.
lie, is not true.
Okay, all right, you've made your statement. Board member has responded. Thank you, AJ. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
If I may, sorry. That was rude of me, I'm really sorry. So there was no property owner comments on this. Is that typical for special board director meetings?
Well, I think in the past, we've had board member and member comments, but for this meeting, it's a special meeting, and we wanted to just keep it to the business items, and we'll have a regular meeting on Thursday where we'll have member comments.
Okay.
So it is unique, yeah.
The board member, or the board meeting is the 13th, it's not this Thursday.
Oh, the 13th. Sorry.
Just gonna let
There's a
them
lot of
know it's
meetings
this
we've had,
Thursday.
so,
Many meetings.
yeah, all right.
We knew, us too, we knew, but you guys never listened.
Actually, your next meeting's going to be on the 8th.
Oh, yeah.
Do we want to allow any time for for anyone to say anything, if they would like to, or there's no microphone.
No.
but-
You'd have to come up with a mic.
Yeah, at the SGM, I think you can.
There will be opportunities at the SGM.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
so-
think, well, I don't know, it's up to the,
Okay, so Stephanie made a motion to adjourn.
I have one question quick. Do you have to have a formal resolution for what we did as far as putting Joe as the signer of checks?
You did read a
You
formal
did.
resolution.
I did read.
Yes.
So that's enough, and that's all that you need in and recording the vote, correct?
As far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
okay, there's a motion on the table to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?